I don't know whether I have excellent taste or if I'm just really easy to please, because most of what I've been reading lately has been 5 stars. Hello everybody, it's Katie here. So I've been pretty quiet on the channel for the past month or so, mostly because we've had a couple of heat waves here in the UK. I am somebody who suffers quite a lot in the heat, and the meds that I'm on actually lowers my tolerance for the amount of heat I can bear. So for the past few weeks I have been a headachy, sleep-deprived, exhausted mess. So yeah, I haven't really been in the mood for making bookish content. But the good news is that I have been reading quite a lot. So I thought I would take the time to update you on the books that I've been reading and my thoughts on them. It's been a while since I've done any sort of reading update, and I've read quite a lot of books, so I'm not going to discuss everything. So I'm just going to pick out some of the more recent standout books and chat about them. So the book that I finished reading most recently is The Many Half-Lived Lives of Sam Sylvester. I've told you before that I'm a sucker for a pretty cover, so once I saw the art I was immediately drawn in, and then the title is just superbly enticing as well. So this book follows Sam, who is a non-binary autistic main character. They move to a new town after an incident that takes place at home that you learn more about throughout the course of the story, and Sam has been compiling a book containing the stories of kids who never made it past the age of 19, and that book is full of accidental deaths, tragedies, murders, deaths that are unsolved. And Sam ends up moving to the town where one of these kids was from, and everyone thinks that it was a tragic accident, but Sam's always had the feeling that it was a murder. So the story revolves around Sam and their new friends unpacking what went on in this boy's life and what led them to their untimely death. So yeah, this was a story that instantly drew me in. I am a person who loves unsolved mysteries. I have read my fair share of true crime and murder mystery stories, so I just really loved the idea of this book, and from a few chapters in I knew it was going to be a favourite from this year, and I was absolutely correct. The vibes in this story are immaculate. There is so much diversity, and I love reading stories that have autistic main characters. I've been seeking more of them out over the past couple of years, so this is just a great book that has a lot to offer, and I would highly recommend picking it up if you are somebody who loves a good mystery. So next up is a book that I read a few months ago now, and I've been meaning to talk about it for some time, and I'm still debating whether or not to do a full discussion video on it, and it is Summerslam by Lee Mandelo. This is the most complicated relationship I have ever had with a book. This story follows Andrew after the death of his best friend Eddie. Everyone believes that Eddie's death was by suicide, but Andrew knows him best, and he knows that there is something more to Eddie's death. And so he goes to the house that Eddie was living at college to piece together what happened to him in his final weeks. There is an element of fantasy to this story because both Eddie and Andrew have the ability to communicate with the dead in some way. Not so much as them chatting with a ghost, but more getting a feel for the experiences that these phantoms went through. And it's also an extremely dark story. If you're interested in checking it out, then I would definitely recommend looking up the trigger warnings. I went into this book with such high hopes because I'd seen people hyping it up as a great new adult story. I saw people compare it to The Raven Cycle and All for the Game. I would say that if you enjoyed Joseph Kavinsky's subplot in The Raven Cycle, then you will love this book. Me personally, I did not like Joseph Kavinsky, and going into this book it felt like fanfiction of him and Ronan, and I'm not gonna lie, I hated it. But for the first half of this book I was ready to rate it 2 stars. I just didn't like it at all. There was so much pointless heavy drug use. You know, I'm not against drug use in books, you know, we see it all the time, but it just felt like there was too much of it in this book. It seemed to be moving too slowly because I was interested in the overall mystery of Eddie's death, but it didn't seem to be progressing. I couldn't connect with the characters at all. I ended up taking a break from it for about a month because I was convinced that I was going to just drop it, which I don't do with books often at all. I am that stubborn type of person who will finish a book once they've started it, no matter how much they dislike it. And yeah, I thought this was going to be one of those books that I was going to have to drag myself through the rest of. But then when I picked it back up, something suddenly switched. I don't know what it was, but I just enjoyed it so much more once I went back to it. And then once you reach the halfway point, you start getting more to the plot. You start learning more about the characters. And then out of nowhere, it went from being a 2-star read to a 5-star read. That's never happened to me with a book before. And it's just complicated. I already want to reread it knowing how it ends so that I can appreciate it more from the very beginning. But yeah, it was my most hated book of the year and then became one of my favourite books of the year, and I don't know how that happened, and I'm still just in awe of what this book put me through. Yeah. So next up I have So This Is Ever After by F.T. Lukens. So the main character in this book, Arik, he is a typical chosen one type of character who ended up at the centre of a prophecy that said he was going to defeat the villain in this world and restore peace. And this story starts at the end of that prophecy. He's already defeated the villain. He's supposed to restore the princess to her rightful throne, but he discovers that the princess is already dead, and so he takes on the role of king as a temporary ruler, but it turns out to not be so temporary because there is a curse and rules that he's got to follow, and basically he needs to find a spouse in order to continue ruling and staying alive. So with the help of his friend Matt, he tries to find a significant other, but of course, as is the case with stories like this, he's desperately in love with his best friend Matt. And so you have my favourite type of slow burn filled with miscommunication and lost opportunities, and it's the type of book that you want to throw across the room but you can't stop reading. And it was just a lot of fun. It was a fantasy book that reads like a contemporary, and I love stories that are like that. It was hilarious and heartwarming, and yeah, it was a perfect Pride read. So next up we have the book that I picked up on a whim, and it is Sorcery of Thorns. I mentioned in my birthday book haul video that I picked this up purely because somebody compared it to Howl's Moving Castle. And so I picked it up not really knowing anything about the plot. Oh my god. Considering I went in with like absolutely no expectations, this became one of my all-time favourite books. It is a standalone fantasy book. I don't really know how to give you an overview of the plot because there's so much going on in it, but the setting of this book is basically giant libraries that contain books that have personalities and that contain spells and that can be dangerous. These books contain the spells of sorcerers, and sorcerers in this world are still a small fraction of the population, and in some places they are very much feared. And the main character in the story, Elizabeth, ends up working with a sorcerer, Nathaniel Thorne, who at first she does fear and is wary of, but then she learns more about him and of sorcery in general, and her opinions change. And it's just an absolutely gorgeous story. It's a fantasy story that has all the depths that you need, but it's not too dark, it's not too intense, like a lot of the heavy fantasy stories that we get nowadays in YA. It still manages to be fun and uplifting whilst giving you that eerie fantasy setting that you need. Nathaniel is just such a great character. The person that compared him to Howl made me want to pick up this book. I don't know who you are, but thank you so much because I love Nathaniel with my whole heart now. He's not like your other YA book boys. He's not like other boys, guys. He's really not. He's funny, he's got a dark past, but he's not brooding in the same way that a lot of lead characters tend to be. He's just funny and nice, and I love him, and I love Elizabeth, and I love them. And I love this book. So next I have a couple of my favourite subgenre of book, and it is banned books. Musical banned books, not books that have been banned. And the first one is It Goes Like This. So this is another one that I read during Pride Month. It follows the story of a queer girl band, which was why I wanted to read it in the first place, because I always tend to read about queer boy bands, never queer girl bands, so yeah, I was determined to read this one, and it was quite difficult to find, but I finally got my hands on it. Basically, the band in this book were a famous band whilst they were in school and growing up, and then in the later teens they went their separate ways, and in the story their hometown goes through a natural disaster, so they all decide to come back for a one-off charity concert, and it follows each of the 4 characters, and they're such different personalities, so it's a great contrast. I absolutely adored this story, and I'm sad that it doesn't get spoken about as much as the boy band ones do, because it's got everything you need. It's got found family, it's got diverse characters, it's got great romance, it's got funny moments, it's got sad moments. It's just a great coming of age story, and yeah, I'm so glad that I went out of my way to find it. It's easily one of my favourite banned books now. So yeah. The second one is Kiss and Tell. This story follows Hunter, who is in the boy band Kiss and Tell, but he is the openly gay member of the group, and it follows his struggles being the gay boy band member and everything that that entails. I was so looking forward to this book, and I wanted to absolutely adore it, but I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. I won't lie. Like, it was a good book, it was a good story, it just wasn't great. It didn't leave a big impression on me. It was a story that contained a couple of important messages, but overall it was kind of nothingness. It just didn't have the same impact on me that other boy band stories have. It was one of 2 boy band books that I'd read this year, the other one being If This Gets Out, and I just felt like that was a lot better and more exciting than this one was. But it is still an enjoyable story, and it has great characters. I just don't think it's one that I'd want to go back and reread, unfortunately. So of course I have to have a graphic novel, and it is Fence Volume 5. For those of you who don't know, I picked up Fence last year after years of wanting to read it but never actually purchasing it. It was always calling out to me from the shelves, and I had so many people tell me to read it, but it was just one of those things that I never got around to it. When it comes to graphic novels, they do tend to be more expensive than the average book, obviously because they're filled with art that people put their everything into, but it does mean that I have to be slightly more committed to buying them. And yeah, once I finally did pick it up, it became my entire personality. I love this series so much. These characters mean the world to me, and it has been a long and torturous wait for the 5th volume. It finally came out just a couple of days ago. I got it and I tried to savour it, but I flew through it in under an hour, obviously, and now I'm sitting here waiting once again for more content. It didn't disappoint. I absolutely adored it. I have a lot of love in my heart for every single one of them. So they are some of the more standout books that I've read recently. I have read a lot more, but would be here all day if I spoke about every single one of them. So yeah, in general, a lot of what I've been reading lately has been 5 stars. There have been a couple of disappointing ones, but mostly it's been great. So please do let me know what you've been reading lately. Have you read any of the books that I've talked about in this video? Let me know all the bookish thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!